The house was always quiet before sunrise. Not peaceful, controlled. Julian Cross stood in the glass-walled kitchen, cufflinks already fastened, tie perfectly centered, watching the city bleed light through the windows. 42 floors below, traffic pulsed like a living thing. Up here, nothing moved unless he allowed it to. The coffee machine hummed. The clock ticked. Every sound had a purpose. That was how he survived. Behind him, at the long marble table, his twins sat side by side. Theo was lining up his cereal pieces by size. Maya traced invisible shapes on the tabletop with her finger. They didn't look up when Julian adjusted his watch. They rarely did. Julian signed time to eat with crisp precision, the same way he signed schedule and school and bed. Efficient. Minimal. Correct. He had learned sign language the way he learned acquisitions. Intellectually, thoroughly, and without mess. The twins nodded. Obedient. Silent. Good kids. That thought landed heavier than it should have. He turned away before it could settle. Providing was his strength. Structure. Safety. The doctors had praised him for how quickly he adapted, how well-funded their programs were, how impressive it was that nothing about the twins' lives lacked opportunity. Best therapists. Best schools. Best equipment money could buy. No one ever asked if the house felt warm. The nanny would handle the rest. That was why he hired her. Elena Morales always entered the penthouse like it was holding its breath. She slipped off her shoes by the door, toes curling briefly into the cool stone floor, grounding herself before the day began. Wealth had a sound to it. Too much space, too little echo, and this place hummed with it. In the playroom, Theo and Maya lit up the moment they saw her. Their joy wasn't loud. It was kinetic. Maya bounded toward her, hands already moving, face alive with expression. Theo followed more carefully, watching first, then smiling when Elena dropped to their level and exaggerated her greeting. Good morning, she signed, loose and playful, letting the words dance instead of snap into place. They laughed, shoulders shaking, eyes bright. Elena felt it every time. That quiet, aching privilege of being trusted. She knew the rules. No unnecessary risks. No crossing lines. She was paid well to stay in her lane, and she intended to. But children were not lanes. They were worlds. And these two lived in rhythm, in vibration, in feeling. She turned on the small speaker, not for sound, but for the tremor it sent through the floor. Music they could feel. Theo hesitated. Maya didn't. Elena held out her hands. The dance started small. Upstairs, in his private office, Julian closed a deal worth 9 figures without raising his voice once. He ended the call, exhaled, and glanced at the clock. Too early to leave. Too quiet. A faint vibration crept through the floor, so subtle it could have been imagined. Julian frowned. The house systems were flawless. He stepped out of the office, irritation prickling his spine. The sensation came again. Rhythmic. Intentional. He followed it down the hall, past the formal dining room no one used, toward the kitchen, and stopped, because through the doorway, framed in morning light, his children were moving. Not randomly, not stiffly. They were dancing, barefoot on marble, laughing. Hands in the air. Elena spun Maya gently while Theo stomped, grinning so wide it hurt to see. The floor pulsed beneath them. The room was alive. Julian didn't breathe. He stood frozen, a man who owned everything, except this moment. And in the silence he had curated so carefully, something inside him cracked wide open. Julian should have spoken. He didn't. He stood in the doorway long enough for the moment to bruise him. Long enough to register every detail his mind would later replay without mercy. The way Maya's laughter shook her whole body. The way Theo watched the floor instead of Elena's feet, feeling the rhythm through his soles. The way Elena adjusted instinctively, slowing, lowering, matching them without a single spoken cue. Julian had paid for specialists who never achieved this. The music stopped. Not abruptly, carefully. Elena felt the shift before she saw him. The vibration died under her feet, and her spine went rigid. She turned slowly, heart dropping as Julian Cross came into focus, immaculate and unreadable, filling the doorway like a verdict. The twins followed her gaze. Their smiles faltered. Theo's hand stilled. Maya's shoulders tightened. Julian raised one hand. A precise gesture. Enough. The word didn't need sound. The children froze. Something in Elena burned. I'm sorry, she said automatically, voice low even though it didn't matter. Years of instinct rose up, apologize first, explain later. She signed as well, fast and nervous. This wasn't. Julian didn't answer right away. He looked at the speaker. The bare feet on marble. The flushed faces of his children. Joy. Unmanaged. Unscheduled. Unapproved. His chest tightened, sharp and unwelcome. How long? He asked, out of habit more than curiosity. Elena swallowed. A few weeks. They respond to vibration. It helps with coordination. Emotional regulation. She sounded defensive. She hated that. Julian nodded once, filing it away like data. Of course they did. Of course this had a rationale. Everything had to. He crouched in front of the twins, movements controlled, deliberate. He signed, "Are you tired?" Theo shook his head quickly. Maya signed happy with exaggerated enthusiasm, her hands flying. Julian's throat closed. He had never seen that word from her without prompting. He straightened too fast. "That's enough for today," he said, already stepping back. Elena, a word. The twins watched as she followed him into the hallway, confusion rippling across their faces. Behind the closed door, silence pressed in. "You violated the boundaries we discussed," Julian said calmly. Too calmly. Unstructured activities. Physical exertion without clearance. Elena met his gaze. Her hands curled at her sides. "With respect, sir, joy isn't a boundary violation." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about joy. It's about control. Safety." "No," she said quietly. "It's about fear." The word hung between them. Julian felt it land somewhere deep and ugly. "You're overstepping," he said. "You were hired to assist, not improvise." "And you hired me," Elena replied, steady now, "because your children weren't thriving." That did it. For a split second, the mask slipped. Grief flared, raw, unguarded. Then it was gone. "You're done for the day," Julian said. "We'll revisit expectations tomorrow." Elena nodded once, dignity intact, and walked past him without another word. Julian stood alone in the hall, the echo of vibration still ghosting through the floor. In the kitchen, Theo sat motionless, palms flat against the marble, eyes fixed on nothing. Maya didn't move at all, and for the first time since becoming a father, Julian realized something devastatingly clear. Whatever had just happened, he was the only one who hadn't known how to listen. Julian Cross did not replay moments. That was a rule. He moved forward, corrected variables, eliminated risk. Reflection was inefficient. Regret was indulgent. By the next morning, the incident in the kitchen had been reduced, on paper, to a deviation in routine. He adjusted the schedule. Therapy at 8. School at 10. Occupational review in the afternoon. The speaker was removed from the kitchen. The floors recalibrated to eliminate vibration feedback. Quiet restored. Control reasserted. The twins complied. That was the problem. Theo ate without arranging his cereal. Maya finished breakfast without signing happy again. They followed instructions with mechanical precision that felt too familiar, too eerily like the children Julian himself had once been. He told himself it was normal. Children adapted. That was what he had always done. Elena spent the day in her apartment, sitting on the edge of her bed with her shoes still on. She hadn't been fired. Not yet. That uncertainty gnawed at her worse than anger would have. She replayed the scene despite herself. Julian's raised hand, the twins freezing, the way joy had collapsed into obedience in a single breath. She knew that look. She'd worn it as a child every time laughter crossed an invisible line. Elena opened her notebook, the one she never showed anyone. Inside were sketches, movement patterns, hand shapes, notes on how different rhythms affected Theo versus Maya. Pages of care, pages of proof. She closed it. None of it mattered if it scared him. By evening, her phone buzzed. Julian Cross, return tomorrow. Same hours. No apology. No explanation. Just control. Elena exhaled slowly and typed back, understood. The next week passed like that. Carefully, stiffly, painfully polite. Julian avoided the kitchen when Elena was there. Meetings ran long. Dinners were solitary. When he did appear, his presence acted like gravity. Everything pulled inward, quieted, behaved. Elena followed the rules. No music. No dancing. Structured games only. Approved sensory tools. The twins drifted. Theo stopped initiating. Maya's movements grew smaller, her expressions muted. Elena compensated where she could, extra eye contact, gentle touch, exaggerated signs. But something essential had been withdrawn. Julian noticed. He noticed because the reports were flawless and the children were not. During one therapy session, a specialist paused longer than usual. "They're compliant," she said carefully. "But they're less expressive." Julian's pen hovered midair. "Define expressive." She hesitated. "Less themselves." He dismissed it with a nod, but the words lodged under his ribs. That night, Julian stood in the darkened kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed. He pressed his palm flat against the marble countertop. Nothing. No vibration. No echo. Just cold stone. Across the hall, Theo lay awake, hands twitching faintly against the mattress, searching for something that wasn't there. In her room, Elena stared at the ceiling, wondering how long she could stay silent without becoming complicit. By the end of the week, 3 truths had settled heavily into place. Julian could not admit he was afraid. Elena could not unsee what joy looked like in that house. And the children were paying the price for both. The resistance held, but it was already starting to crack. The call came at 6:14 a.m. Julian was already awake, dressed, halfway through emails when his phone vibrated across the desk. Unknown number. Hospital code. His chest tightened before he answered. Theo had collapsed during occupational therapy. By the time Julian reached the children's hospital, the twins were stable, exhausted, frightened, and clinging to one another in a narrow bed that beeped softly around them. No seizure. No structural issue. The doctors used careful words. Sensory overload, stress response, emotional dysregulation. Julian heard only one thing. "You missed something." Elena arrived an hour later, hair pulled back, eyes dark with worry. She stopped short when she saw Julian outside the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya spotted her. She lifted one trembling hand and signed stay. Julian froze. The doctor cleared his throat. "It might help if you both remain. Familiar support can reduce cortisol levels." There it was. No escape. They took turns sitting beside the bed, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Julian learned quickly that hospitals erased hierarchy. He held Theo's hand while Elena traced calming patterns on Maya's arm. Their movements synchronized without discussion, one grounding, one soothing. It unsettled him. Hours passed in shared silence. Paper cups of bitter coffee. The low hum of machines. Julian watched Elena work. Not performing, not defiant, just present. The twins responded immediately. Breathing slowed. Fingers relaxed. Julian felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Relief. And jealousy. When the nurse finally left them alone, Elena broke the silence. "This is what happens when expression gets trapped," she said softly. "It turns inward." Julian stared at his son's sleeping face. "You think this is my fault?" "I think," she replied carefully, "that fear can look like safety if no one questions it." He should have shut that down. Instead, he stayed quiet. That night, a storm grounded all outbound flights. Julian's parents' estate, where the twins were meant to recover, lost power. Hospital discharge plans collapsed. The nurse returned with a clipboard. "We'll need someone to stay overnight. Preferably both of you." Julian nodded automatically. Elena hesitated. "I can sleep in the chair." "No," Julian said, surprising them both. "There's a family suite." The word family sat awkwardly between them. In the small, dimly lit room, there was nowhere to retreat. No schedules. No walls of glass. Just 2 adults, 2 sleeping children, and the low truth neither could ignore anymore. Julian loosened his tie for the first time in years. Elena watched him do it. And in the forced closeness, something fragile began to surface. Not trust yet, not forgiveness, but the dangerous possibility that neither of them could do this alone. The twins slept late the next morning, tangled together in a way that made Julian ache. Theo's hand was fisted in Maya's sleeve, as if even unconscious he feared losing her. The storm outside had softened to a steady rain, blurring the city into watercolor streaks beyond the window. Elena sat cross-legged on the couch, quietly sketching in her notebook. Julian noticed it only because he was trying not to. He had spent the night in the armchair, jacket folded with unnecessary care, eyes never fully closing. In the dim half-light, the weight of the previous day pressed in. Too much time to think, nowhere to put the thoughts. "What is that?" he asked finally, nodding toward the notebook. Elena's hand paused. She considered lying. It would be easier. Observations, she said instead. Movement patterns. What helps them regulate? She hesitated, then added, what they lose when they can't. Julian stood and crossed the room. He expected clinical notes, charts, metrics. Instead, he saw drawings, curved lines showing how Maya spun when she felt safe, heavy blocks of shading around Theo's shoulders when he withdrew, marginal notes written in careful, almost tender handwriting. Responds to pressure through feet. Needs permission to take space. Joy increases coordination. Julian's throat tightened. You've been doing this the whole time, he said. Elena nodded. I was afraid to show you. Why? She closed the notebook slowly. Because every time Joy entered the room, you looked like you were waiting for it to break. The words landed cleanly. No accusation. Just truth. Julian turned away, pressing his palm to the window. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting his reflection. My wife died 2 years after they were born, he said, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. Complications. Sudden. Elena said nothing. The diagnosis came 6 months later. Deafness. Permanent. He swallowed. I remember thinking, of course something else would be taken. He laughed once, hollow. I decided nothing would ever surprise me again. He faced her then. Doctors told me routine would protect them. That unpredictability causes stress. So I eliminated it. Elena's voice was gentle. You eliminated yourself too. The truth of it hit harder than any accusation. She took a breath. My mother worked 3 jobs. I was the quiet one, the easy one. Her gaze dropped. I learned early that if you didn't make noise, you didn't get left behind. She met his eyes. Dancing with them? That wasn't rebellion. It was survival. For all of us. Silence filled the room, thick and intimate. From the bed, Maya stirred. She reached blindly, searching. Julian moved without thinking. He sat beside her and let her tuck her hand into his sleeve. Elena watched, heart in her throat. For the first time, Julian didn't correct the grip, didn't reposition, didn't schedule the moment away. He stayed. And in that stillness, the mystery between them sharpened into something clearer and far more dangerous. If control had cost him this much, what else had it taken? They were discharged just before noon. Clear scans, strict instructions, low stimulation, emotional consistency. Julian nodded through it all, already planning contingencies, already building a new system in his head. The driver waited downstairs. The car idled. Normal life pressed in, impatient and loud. In the elevator, Maya leaned into Elena's side. Theo pressed his heel rhythmically against the floor, testing for vibration that wasn't there. Julian noticed. Wait, he said suddenly as the doors opened. The driver looked confused. Elena froze. Julian turned to her. You were right. The words felt like glass in his throat. The dancing, the expression. I took it away because I was afraid. He exhaled sharply, and my fear hurt them. Elena didn't soften. Not yet. Admitting that isn't enough, she said. You don't get to control the truth just because it's uncomfortable. His jaw tightened. I'm trying. No, she shot back, voice steady but fierce. You're negotiating. You still want guarantees. The twins watched them closely, sensing the shift. Julian lowered his voice. What do you want from me? Elena hesitated, then said it, finally. I want you to trust me. Not as staff. As someone who sees your children. That's the problem, Julian said, the old edge surfacing. You're not their parent. The words cut deeper than he intended. Elena went very still. Neither are you, she said quietly. Not when you disappear behind rules. Silence exploded between them. Theo flinched. Maya's hands flew up, frantic. Julian saw it too late. I'm sorry, he signed quickly to the twins. Not angry, but the damage was done. Elena stepped back, pain blazing through her composure. This is exactly why I can't stay, she said. You don't want partnership. You want obedience. Julian's chest burned. You're leaving? Yes. The word landed like an impact. I won't be the one who teaches them how to feel only when permitted. She turned and walked toward the exit, shoulders squared, dignity intact even as her hands trembled. Maya broke free. She ran after Elena, grabbing her wrist, signing desperately. Please, don't. Elena dropped to her knees instantly, gathering her close, tears finally spilling. Julian stood frozen. Everything he had built, every safeguard, collapsed in that single moment. He realized the truth with brutal clarity. This wasn't about losing control. It was about losing them. And this time, no amount of money, power, or fear could protect him from the choice standing right in front of him. The car ride home was silent. Julian sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. The city passed in a blur of gray and gold, but he didn't see it. His mind replayed Elena's words, her gaze, the fire in her hands when she told him he wanted obedience, not partnership. Theo and Maya slept quietly in the back seat, worn out but restless in the small way children always are after intense emotion. Julian watched their small chests rise and fall and realized the truth he had avoided for years. He had been absent in the moments that mattered most. At home, Julian wandered through the silent penthouse. The marble floors reflected his exhaustion back at him. He pressed his palm to the kitchen counter, the same counter that had been alive just days ago. Empty, cold, no vibration, no laughter, only echoes of his own failure. Elena, meanwhile, sat in her small apartment, legs crossed, notebook open but untouched. She thought of the twins' faces, their trust, and the fleeting joy she had tried to protect. She realized that leaving had been temporary. If Julian wanted to change, if he